tonight. I'd like to go ahead and have Stan Rodriguez do an opening for us. Stan?
Maya khan bao pili pen mech peyi nyep matayong nabra nya da kamakan sakpo kenja li pe wu pi nyep mat e pe nyep mat yu khan nyep mat kwa khan pugna je nyep je ye wa ma shu ya de ni ma khan Creator of all, I ask that you look down upon each and every one of us who have come here. We wish to welcome all of these people here to the land of our people, the land of the Kumeyaay. This land, the true land, our holy land. Bless them in their minds and their hearts and their bodies as they come here for this occasion to not just enjoy themselves but also to learn. Because we teach each other, and through this medium, other people learn. So there is a serious part to this too, and I ask that you help them with this. And when we are all done, I ask that you give them all a safe trip home.
Thank you, Stan. At this point, our slides are up and ready to go, so I would like to introduce the panel, starting with Paul, here to my left.
I'm Paul Gannon. I'm a longtime comic book veteran. I also a lifelong interest in Mexican history, and in the 1990s, when I was given the opportunity to do a character for the DC universe, my love of Mexico science fiction and history combined to co-create Chronos, which you can see on Comixology. There's not a collection yet, which I'm sad about. But my current project is a graphic novel about the Aztec Empire, and it's currently online. You can see it on my website, bigredhair.com.
I'm Kate Spilby, and I'm a professor at San Diego State University. I'm a cultural anthropologist, and I also have the honor and pleasure of being the endowed chair of the Sequan Institute on Tribal Gaming. I've worked with about 150 tribal governments around the United States on history and cultural and linguistic and nation building and recovery. So I'm really excited about learning more along with all of you from this incredible panel.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stan Rodriguez. I am on Tribal Council for the San Isabel Band of the Vide Nation. I am also director of Kumeyaay Community College. We are the only operational tribal tertiary institution in California that offers an associate's and soon to offer a bachelor's program. Thank you very much.
My name is John Swogger. I'm an archaeologist and an archaeological illustrator. I work with Indigenous communities around the world, in the Pacific and in North America, and I now make comics about the work that we do with them.
Hi, I'm Jen Shannon. I am a cultural anthropologist, a professor, and a museum curator at the University of Colorado Boulder, and I work on NAGPR Comics, which is sort of an extension of the community-based research that I do.
I'm Elijah Benson. I'm from the Mandan Rivercrowd Nation. I currently work in our tribal education department as a Mandan language apprentice.
Thank you. Thank you. We're very honored to have the panel that we have here today. And as I said earlier, we're honored to have you all here in the audience. We appreciate it, appreciate the interest. We have several slides essentially broken up into 3 different phases. What we'd like to do is start with the bicentennial coins and some apparent and non-apparent aspects of it. I'd like to have Stan and Kate elaborate on this particular slide, if you would, please. Yes.
On this slide, it shows a bicentennial coin for San Diego. And take a look at it. They have Cabrillo, Father Sarah. They have settlers coming into San Diego. They have all these things going on. One of the things that they forgot is the first people from here, the people who are still here, the Kumeyaay people, our people, who have never relinquished our territory. And this is an example of marginalization that has taken place, romanticizing, the West, however, leaving out, some of the key players, which are the native people from here. And if any of you don't know, San Diego has more reservations than any other county in the country. Of the reservations here in San Diego, 12 of them, most of the reservations here are Kumeyaay reservations, Ipai, Tipai, Kumeyaay reservations. And you don't see any of that here. And another example was this past Saturday, they had an event at Old Town, San Diego, where they brought somebody from the House of Spain, and he talked about the glory of Spain. They did not even acknowledge the Kumeyaay people. They didn't even, and the other thing about that was that Old Town, it sits on the land of Cosoy, which is a traditional Kumeyaay village that the Spaniards encroached upon. Thank you.
Kate, is there something you'd like to elaborate on?
Well, I think, like you said, 50 years later, that is now the 250th anniversary. I think that really is the impetus for the whole panel. I know Mike here was the one with the vision, saying that those students growing up here in San Diego, or even in the whole state, are missing out on the story. I know that any of us who teach California tribal history at any level, when students are exposed to this information, in my case at the college level, they're angry. They're like, why was I denied this? How come I never learned this before? Where can I find out more? And so I think that is part of just the overall thrust of the panel is, what is the message of resilience and, sharing that story often for the first time, and what is the media to do that through, and what is the audience or audiences for that. So again, I think everybody here has a lot to share about how to do that.
Very good, thank you. Appreciate that. Should we move on to the second part? Mike? Okay. You want to flip the next slide? So, we'd like to move, at this point, we'd like to move on to the NAGPRA comic. And so, you folks like to pick up there?
So I can explain what NAGPRA is for those of you that don't know it. It's the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. It was passed in 1990, and it empowers tribes to request back from museums and other federally funded institutions their ancestors' bones and bodies, sacred objects, associated burial items, and all of that. And so it's part human rights, civil rights, social justice law. And I work on this particular series with John. Anishinaabe Sonia Adalai is an archaeologist that works at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. And really what this comic does is it explains what the law is, how it works, but more importantly, it tells about specific experiences of tribes with the law from their perspective. So it's based on collaborative work between us, the three producers, who co-author it with tribal members that are telling their own perspective on their experience with the law.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting mix from a storytelling point of view. So you have the information about the law, which is quite technical, and really it's a question of sort of unpicking it and making sure that people understand the jargon, people understand the implications of the law. But then when you want to show the law in practice, what we did was we went to various tribal members and asked them to explain what their experience was. So the comic is kind of half and half, this informational unpicking of something quite technical, and at the same time focusing on people's personal experience of the impact of that law. So from a comics creation perspective, it's sort of two kinds of stories rolled into one, which is both challenging to produce, but also I think very rewarding you do get a sense of the personal and individual context of something that can be quite abstract. The law is often, can seem very remote until it suddenly bears down on you or on your community. And that's where the storytelling side really comes into its own. It shows what that really means to people, how it affects them, and their community, their families, and so on. So it's been an interesting project to work on. It's very different to kind of archaeological comics that I usually produce, which are sort of more informational. You know, what did you dig up and what the date of it was, and so on. And it's this personal side that kind of lifts it beyond it being just a purely informational work.
Thank you. Is there anything you'd like to elaborate on, Elijah?
Yeah, and so I guess where I come in with this process is eventually I'd like to be, as a language apprentice, I'd like to be in the schools and in our community school teaching the Mandan language. And so we'd like to use any medium to make it approachable and fun for children and whatnot. And so once we complete our comment for our tribe, it's going to be something that we're going to be bringing into schools and we have 6 communities in our reservation, so we're going to be in all the elementary schools, and at the appropriate time we'll have those stories be told.
Thank you. Should we move on to the Aztec Empire? And Paul will be elaborating further on that.
All right, so this is a project that I've been thinking about doing for some time because this story has never really been serviced well in a visual medium. There's no movie or TV show outside of like a sort of a public television reenactment thing where they can get maybe 6 people and they usually dress them up completely inaccurately. And so as the 500th anniversary approached, I thought this story really needed to be told. It's just filled with so many myths. The most ridiculous one being that the Aztec thought of the Spaniards as gods, or that Cortez was a returning Quetzalcoatl. Those are post-conquest myths, colonial myths created by the Spaniards and perpetuated for so many centuries that they're in current textbooks. And so when I went about to do this, my attitude was that I didn't want to add anything, any kind of editorializing. It wasn't my story to tell. All I wanted to do was to be a reporter, to take the material that is already there. That like there's obviously memoirs from the conquistador side. There is codex images and texts in Nahua from the local side. So all I want to do with this project is to combine the visual images from the codexes and the texts on both sides of the story and create a narrative based on this. So you can see in the previous, actually, if you go back just one slide. So in the previous, this is one of the pages here. I'm afraid the colors are washed out. They're all kind of washed out. You can see it online on our Big Red Hair website. So this is one of the sequences where a messenger comes up to some Aztec generals to report on the latest situation with the Spaniards who have arrived at the coast. And then we can go to the next slide. So the next slide shows just the top panel of that page and all of the elements that go into any given panel. So this is what I'm talking about. I'm talking about taking archaeological information, anthropological information, and texts and combining them into comic books. Because as we know, comics is, well, it's my favorite medium that combines visual images and text. And so there's one more example of that. So there's another page. A scene between what we call these sort of unsung characters in history. What you're looking at here is Montezuma's daughter. She was married to one of Montezuma's commanding generals, and their story has just never been told. It has been written down. You can find it, but you have to dig for it. It's not readily available. Even in the gold standard history that we have right now, a book written in the 1990s called Conquest by a man named Hugh Thomas, incredibly researched. But even that book doesn't include these characters in it. They're mentioned in passing. So this information is sitting there in archives, and I'm super obsessed with research. I love doing research. So for me, I will go down any rabbit hole anytime, and that's what I did. So you can see again, one panel from that page that we just showed, and here's all the elements that go into that. So it's archaeology, in the upper left, it's archaeology from existing sites. And you can see objects like her jewelry. These all are in museums, they're readily available, you can see them. And then famous patterns. And again, I have to make sure that all of the clothing and all the murals and stuff make sense, because symbology is there. You can't make up stuff. And so, for instance, the codex images that I would use for murals, they have to be specific. You can see a little row of them down in the very, very lower part. You can see a few figures there. They have to make sense to the scene. So it's sort of like, the way I love to describe it is if you've seen the photographs of, say, teenagers in Tokyo wearing English slogans that make no sense whatsoever. So I didn't want that to be happening in this series. So even things like clothing patterns, like it's sort of like, the Scottish tartans, the Scottish plaids had, specific family clans. So things like that I have to pay attention to. And these four characters are my favorite in the series. These are the Council of Four, the commanding generals. And as you can see, I'm not changing anything. I'm not changing their names, not changing their outfits. This is me just being a reporter, just reporting on events that took place 500 years ago.
Thank you. Following up, there aren't any slides for the next topic, but essentially the next topic is creating illustrations regarding the Kumeyaay peoples here in San Diego. We've been able to pull several folks together from the San Diego bands. As most of you probably are aware, San Diego has the highest concentration of reservations throughout the nation. We're the Kumeyaay tribe, and we're individual bands, not individual tribes. And with that, we're looking to collaborate and start to investigate and illustrate our most sacred stories, but it's not always super sacred, super serious. Some stories are somewhat lighthearted, and they take you through several different topics. At other times, making reference to the situations in different infrastructures within the band requires reference to law, reference to history, and sometimes a certain aspect of personal experience. So what I'd like to do next is have Kate and Stan speak to some of those personal experiences as they're in relation to some of the laws and some of the things that are lacking and or are in abundance for our culture here in San Diego.
Well, I think for me the timing is terrific in terms of bringing back the 250 years is really a great motivator, and also this happens to be a couple months ago, or maybe only a month ago now, the current governor of California did issue a formal apology and acknowledge the state's role in genocide here in California of the Native peoples. But prior to that, in October of 2017, Governor Jerry Brown, the governor at that time, signed a bill, AB 738, which actually requires the development of curriculum for the state of California to teach the counter story to the mission story. Again, the mission story is taught, it's been over 50 years, it's being taught at 4th grade level to all California public school children. And Governor Brown and others acknowledge that is not the correct story, or the only story, obviously, the only version. So again, I think just in terms of the bigger political picture has changed, at least in that narrow way when it comes to education. I know a couple of the tribes here in California, Agua Caliente in Palm Springs, I actually worked with them at the Palm Springs Unified School District to come together and develop a curriculum that the tribe developed, that the story that they would want the students in the Palm Springs Unified School District to know. And again, it was a more traditional curriculum, not using comics, but that's why I think this topic is so exciting to see how it's being used nationally at the issue level, NECPRA level, like how can it be incorporated here, for example, in Kumeyaay. Again, I know Santa Ynez and Chumash up in the Santa Barbara area, they also are working very, very diligently on the curriculum. They had obviously the Chumash Revolt, which they are very deliberately undoing that mission story that has been taught for so long in their area, and saying, you know, the idea that this was a benevolent experience meant to help and civilize the tribal people in that area, you know, and they come back with their version and what they did, and their revolt is very well known. This wasn't something that was accepted, it was forced. And so again, just looking at the context being there as well, that you know, in the tribes in Washington State, they had a similar bill quite a few years ago, and all 29 federally recognized tribes in the state of Washington came together to develop a curriculum that they all agreed on that's being taught at the state level in all the state schools, and of course all the tribal schools. So I think that there is a movement to do that, and again, looking at how students learn now, and also doing it economically, doing it quickly, creating documentaries and films. I mean, that takes a lot of time and money, and you don't always have control if you're getting funding from certain places. But using comics, using this type of storytelling, I think has a lot of opportunity to help with these really important actions that are being taken at the tribal and state level.
And that's for me what I've seen, echoing a lot of what you said, is that our history, our story has been marginalized. From when Cabrillo first arrived here on September 27, 1542, stayed about a week, there were 3 ships that came. They had this big pageant that shows these people dressed up as Spaniards and people dressed up as Indians genuflecting in front of them. That didn't happen. As a matter of fact, some of them got shot with arrows from the Kumeyaay because they encroached in our territory. That part has never been told. Or that the Kumeyaay people are not just in the United States. There's 12 reservations in San Diego, Fort Yuma Reservation is Quezon and Kumeyaay. And in Baja California, there's 4 reservations, I say 6, but my wife tells me there's 4 reservations in Mexico. See, anyway, we argue about that all the time. But, you know, and it speaks to the history of our people. You know, and when we look at this medium of comics, the potential that it has with teaching our people our history, such as in 1769 when the Spaniards landed in went to Cossai, which is now Old Town, they put a mission there. They say nothing about the Kumeyaay attacking it. They say nothing about the Kumeyaay attacking the other mission, November 5th, 1775, burning the whole place down and killing Father Jaime. They say nothing about how Kumeyaay forces almost took San Diego back 3 times during the Mexican era. So all these, you know, parts of history that people do not know about. This is an example of using this. And I like what you said about language too. You know, this is an opportunity, you know, not just to tell our history, but also to incorporate our language. Of the 4,623 Kumeyaay who reside on both sides of the border, there's approximately 45 who still speak the language. And most of them are over the age of 60. Not all of them, but most of them. So, you know, the problem, you know, under the UNESCO, you know, 9 factors of language, vitality, and loss, 5 being, you know, stable, 0 being extinct, the Kumeyaay language is listed as 1, which is critically endangered. This is an opportunity, and you know, to place our language in these books in order to teach our history, in order to teach, you know, our own youth, our own adults, you know, the history of this land here, which is our holy land. You know, in order to learn a language, the best way to learn is through immersion. Really, the only way to learn is through immersion, to gain proficiency. And with this diaspora that's taken place, it's very difficult to bring speakers together. But this is an opportunity where we can make something like that happen. It's an exciting time. You know, some people take a look at comic books and think it's, you know, humorous. No, there's a serious part to it. It can do many different things. This could help revitalize the language, revitalize the culture. I mean, you can do incredible things with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Stan. At this moment in time, I'd like to also thank Mr. Towery, Mike Towery here, for inviting us and bringing this panel together. It already has a certain synergy to it, and a certain power. You know, and a lot of things, that's kind of the first signs when things start to come together. I'm actually a public artist, I'm a sculptor, and I'm proud to be helping to facilitate this process. We have a few other local Native people that are very much on the creative side in this room currently. And earlier we were talking about creativity, you know, on the reservation lands and everywhere else. And we have to make an apparent move toward having our next generations find their creativity. You know, we often talk about spirituality, and spirituality is, you know, in my opinion, is creativity. You know, the Creator, as we say, when we acknowledge the Creator, we say, thank you to the Creator for giving us what we have. You know, that those two things go hand in hand. So once again, Mike, thank you. So we have about another 20 minutes. How do you guys feel? Are there any other aspects, little things that have come to mind that you'd like to elaborate on further? Stan, please.
One last thing. This is a public service announcement for me. First of all, you know, I want to thank Mike for everything that you've done with, developing pedagogy for, to tell our history and also cosmology. And my wife, Anna Gloria, she has developed these Kumeyaay coloring books, which are in the language. Going over villages. I mean, an incredible artist. She's also a traditional basket maker, and just wanted to share that. And for the guys over here at San Pasqual Reservation, thank you for everything you're doing. You know, keeping the culture going with Bjorn and the singing. And my friends from Mesa Grande, you know, everything that you're doing. Stay vegan, and then and my friends from other different tribes out here, and all of you. So thank you very much.
Awesome.
So I just wanted to say that to go off what you were saying about comics and people thinking they're retarded, you can imagine when we work with communities and we say, you know, we're going to talk about these most difficult, traumatic moments and issues, and it's going to be in a comic book, and that only happens if there's a trust-based relationship there. And so we're very honored that communities choose to do this work with us. But it is grant funded from our university, so it's free, it's online. It can be downloaded, it can be shared, but the only people that make profit from this are the community that co-authored it, or Tribal Print Source, which is actually California-based tribal group that is a publisher and printer. And so I just wanted to say that it's free and available to anyone that would like to access it, and that's part of our model.
Awesome, thank you. So at this point, would the panel be all right with opening it up to questions? So please. Over here.
Hi. How easy is it to learn the Kumeyaay language? Like, is the alphabet or the writing system completely different from the American alphabet, or would it be easy to like get a foot in the door to learning it through these comments?
That's a very good question. And Mike, Martha, and myself, we had this conversation a while back. Right now, there's 3 different lexicons that are out there. There was one that was developed by a Belgian linguist. There was another one that was developed by INALI, which is the Instituto Nacional Antropológico Lingüista in Mexico. And then there was another one that was developed by somebody else. And all of them are different. And when I teach language, I teach Kumeyaay language, and one of the things that I say to my students is spell it phonetically. Because there are certain sounds that are just not in the English alphabet. Like, do that, everybody. Well, I think you guys can learn. So, you know, in order to make it effective, we need to standardize it, and that's one of the things that we're looking at. So, and the language is easy. Come to the class. We're going to be teaching in August. Be there.
Where?
At Cumbia Community College on the Sequan Reservation.
Is that in San Diego?
Yep. Wait, where are you at?
San Jose.
It's close. So, we're going to be having classes online so you can look it up. Do you have a laptop?
Yes.
You got this, man. All right.
And for clarity's sake, I'd like to have Mike Connolly with one N, right? Stand up, please. This is the mic that Stan was referencing. Thank you for making it. I say with one N because when we were setting his pass up, I kept getting to put the second one in. So, Mike with one N as he's now known. So, any other questions? Yes.
I'm from New Mexico, but we learned about all the Spaniards, the Indians, all the different makings of what made our state a state. Have you guys worked with the New Mexico tribes to see how they got, or basically I think it became part of the culture back then versus part of the Indian culture here in California?
No, we haven't worked with the New Mexico people, but we have been working on our own way of getting our story told, and that's called pushback. So every time somebody comes up and talks about the glory of Spain, then we step up there and we say, no, we were here first, we shot you guys, you left.
Back in New Mexico was granted to us, not that the Spaniards came, but what happened in the intermixing between the two of them, and how the Pueblo culture banded together, chased out first the Spaniards completely out of the state, said don't come back unless you intend to follow our rules. Then 200 years later, this was way beyond this point, 200 years later, chased out the white man with the same attitude, said don't come back unless you're willing to take our side first. So that's why I asked whether or not you guys have gone and discussed with other Pueblo tribes and tribes or other nations.
I think that also it reveals the difference in the two state agendas, right? New Mexico has actually incorporated the Pueblos into their tourism and their own story in a way that makes the state look good. And Land of Enchantment, come and visit our beautiful Pueblos. And so it was a way that benefited the state. Here, of course, the state chose a different version of events that, again, erased the tribal nations, whether it was focusing on gold rush or the missions or a combination of the two. And I think New Mexico just saw it in their best interest to incorporate the tribes and the beautiful Pueblos and the art.
It goes back to what he said. A lot of the battles that were fought in the courtrooms in Washington State or Washington were based on the fact that the Pueblos pushed back and said, no, this is our land. You came in, we weren't permitted into our reservation, but they made a circle around the spots that the white man didn't really want, so it's not here. But we'll make a circle around your place, and then years later, after they found out like there was uranium, there were beautiful places to go in, there was all these nice resources, white man comes back in and says, I want to take all those away from you, and they says, no, you can't. This was part of what your father gave us, and says, it's your law, we're using it against you.
You know, one of the things here in California, when California became a state, there were 18 treaties that were made with the tribes. This was right after the gold rush, well, during the gold rush. And we never abrogated on any provisions of those treaties. These 18 treaties were never ratified by the United States government. This is why, I mean, we were supposed to have a reservation from the Mexican border all the way to Riverside County. So, but this didn't happen. And one of the reasons for that was the Treaty of San Isabel, which was made January 7th, 1852. This was on the eve of the Civil War, so there were a lot of people coming in from the gold rush, from the Carolinas, Georgia. They had Confederate leanings. And they said basically that they would side with the Confederacy if the treaties were ratified. So this is why those things didn't happen.
Thank you. Yes, to the far left.
Yeah, greetings from Peru. I try to say Incas, and I would admire what you're doing. I'm also a comic artist, and I would like to ask you if you're interested in an exchange of cultures or a project that we can work together. Thank you.
I would love to do an exchange. Let's talk.
Thank you. Yes, your damn friend.
Hi, my name's Eric Starr, and I'm the creator of a book called Super Indian. He ate tainted commodity cheese and got superpowers.
Come on, cheese.
Any of us. Right, and all of y'all, next year when you do this again, because you will do this again, please invite some of us native creators to sit on your panel. Next weekend in Denver, Colorado is the Indigenous Pop Expo, where all of us, there's a bunch of native artists that do this work, and we want to help tell the stories.
Excellent.
We're out there, we're doing the work.
Yeah.
You'll be back at your booth the rest of
Artist Alley, FF11.
Blue Jacket.
So excited.
And what I've told you was introducing myself to you as I had been taught as a child. And I wish for you, your children, and those that you think is yours, have that ability and continue it.
Ooh, thank you. One.
Tibumya ite khan mayu makanab yuhan nyakanab kwahan yehan.
Okay, you and your attorneys might have to first.
Which booth is that? Is there any other elaborations from the panel? I know we had had some earlier conversation about the development of Balboa Park and the actual reasons for and what it reminded me of Balboa Park in its particular stylization. As somebody said, coming to the land, into the flourishing land. Stan, Kate, could one of you elaborate on how California stylized Balboa Park during that particular era?
All right. Well, we have a historian right here, Mike Conley.
Would you mind?
Come on up, Mike. I mean, I can tell, but you know what? Ma niwara ya khan, ma niwara yipchit tekech, you khan. Kapishkwit, tiyo.
He just promised you fry bread, didn't he?
Well, kanam khan. No pressure, Mike.
I was promised I would not be dragged up here. I think most of the people that are here have been to Balboa Park, and if you haven't, you certainly should go up there. It used to be called City Park, and in 1915, it was renamed Balboa Park to commemorate the opening of the Panama Canal, and they had the San Diego Panama Exposition here. And one of the interesting things that happened during that time, at the beginning of the 20th century, there were a lot of Kumeyaay villages still in the urban area of San Diego. And there was a village in Balboa Park of Kumeyaay Indians. And they moved the Indians out of Balboa Park because they thought it was an eyesore for the celebration they were planning. But they wanted to have an Indian village there. And one of the sponsors of the exhibition was the Santa Fe Railroad. So they created an Indian village over where the San Diego Zoo parking lot is now. and they imported Pueblo Indians from New Mexico to man the village. But it was, and this is something I think, to stay with the theme. This is something that I think is really crucial that people understand about the history in California and the history of Balboa Park and San Diego. The fact that the Kumeyaay people actually outlasted the Spanish. Most of our territory was under our control throughout the Spanish period. We actually saw the missions crumble into ruin. We resisted the Mexicans. Most of our territory was under our control, even in the Mexican period, and including, as you heard, the attacks on San Diego itself, even to the point where at one time they had to use ships in the harbor to fire against the attacking warriors in order to escape from being overrun. So we were close to reclaiming all of our territory. We successfully resisted the Spanish. We were victorious against the colonial mission system. And but what happened was there was a confluence of several factors that happened in the late 1800s. The Intercontinental Railroad was completed, or the Transcontinental Railroad was completed, and they needed to get people to come to California, and they needed to dispel the belief that people back east had of the West as being a bunch of wild Indians and wild animals. And so the railroads and the real estate speculators, they used a novel called Ramona as the basis for creating this idea of an idyllic existence under the Spanish missions with the Indians. And they resurrected the missions. All of the missions in California were rebuilt. They were in ruins. They weren't even in existence. They had no blueprints, so they had to invent the mission style, and that's what they call mission revival architecture. They took what they knew about missions and they added to it and created a new style of architecture that eventually morphed into Spanish revival architecture that you see in Balboa Park. So it was an invention to create this myth of California origins. At the same time, in creating that, they had to, the Indians had to have this role of just being these passive background characters who participated in the missions and then kind of disappeared. And so our whole history got distorted, and we essentially got erased in favor of this new version of history. And so the real epitome of that transformation is in the architecture that you see in Balboa Park, and even in the statuary that you see there. There's no acknowledgement in all of the Kumeyaay people that actually had a village there even up until 1915, and it glorifies this kind of mythology. And I think with comics we have an opportunity to really give people a kind of a visual record to show these things as they transition, because it's really a long story to tell, and I'm giving you a very shortened version of it. But it became at one point self-perpetuating, where historians were, as they went and researched, they had confirmation bias in their research, where they went and looked for things that conformed with that idea that they grew up with on how history should be presented. And so you end up having it become self-reinforcing year after year after year, until finally when you go back and tell people these things, and you say, "What did you know about this in San Diego history? Did you know that this occurred?" You encounter cognitive dissonance, where people just they just can't even. They come to terms with it because it's so different than what their parents, what their teachers, what their priests told them as they were growing up. And so the more mechanisms we can use to tell that story beyond just the written word, beyond just reference notes, but actual pictures that people can look at it and they can see, and they can really visualize and understand the history. I think it's very important. So I'm sorry I took so long. Sorry.
all for showing up and listening. Pardon? Oh, I'm sorry, we have one more question.
One comment. Do you know that Mexico in 2013 had all Mayan language soap opera? It was all in Mayan. They said that a lot of people speak Mayan, but they're afraid to do it. But they had this, the telenovelas. They had one telenovela all in Mayan. And that was a way to revive some of the language because I was going on speaking Mayan. So just wanted to let you know.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's Mayan language television soap opera airs in Mexico. That's 2013.
Thank you.
That's the way we go into media.
Yes.
She's had her hand up like for 20 minutes. I'm so
Oh, I'm
sorry.
sorry.
I need to commandeer.
Oh, okay.
I hope
Go
it's
ahead.
Where to start? Now we put pressure on. Sorry. I'm from Mexico myself. Like I'm sure the Peruvian over there, we also have a very complicated history with our indigenous background. Like on one hand, Mexico is named Mexico after the Mexica people, the Aztecs, and on the other hand, on the other hand, it's a very complicated love-hate relationship in Mexico with our indigenous people here in the background. And I was wondering because you, Paul, I think his last name, you mentioned Moctezuma's name with an N, and I was wondering about that because that's kind of like the anglicized version of his name. Are you gonna keep the anglicized version in?
There's use a different, for familiarity, actually, I'll just a bit, for commercial familiarity.
Okay.
I use the word Aztec. Aztec was not what they call themselves, they call themselves Mexica. But to say the Mexican Empire is to also, as we've been using here, to erase the other two aspects of the Triple Alliance. So that would mean not talking about the Texcoco or Tlatelolco. So I use Aztec to describe the political entity, not the culture. And I only use it in the title. In the actual book, it's the Triple Alliance, it's Mexica, it's the correct spelling.
Yeah, I was curious about that because that's one of those things that whenever I read a history book in the U.S., it's like, ugh!
No. But like I could not, I'm not sure how to pronounce it next time. The Nahuatl name for Nahuatl name for the Triple Alliance.
Yeah.
But if I were to title my comic anything but Aztec, you would not know what it is. So I'm sort of tricking people. I'm sort of saying, okay, it's about the Aztecs, but then when you start reading it, then you will get the history lesson.
Yeah, the average American doesn't really know how to pronounce it unless you were.
And I'll just throw in one thing, as being a gringo, I absolutely am in contact with the Mexican community, activists, academics, even Indigenous, and I'm getting wonderful support.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously the math group is going to be like a couple and 100 people that are going to just be indignant no matter how you try and explain what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
But, so I'm absolutely connected to the CMDs.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you were connected with native analysis.
Absolutely.
My other question is about like the graphic novel format. Like I know that there is a lot of colonialist history by translating native stories into books and novels and the written word, because most native cultures did not have a written system. The Aztecs did, but most of it got burned. Although you could argue that the Hipu in Peru is very, how complex it is, like similar industrial system. My other question was like, if the graphic novel does not have that same weighted history of colonialization, not to mention the fact that native stories are often told in such a way that requires visual aid, if that's why the comics have been chosen to tell native history and stories for that reason, or if it's just that just happen to like comics. I was wondering if there was a reason for choosing comics because of that, or
Part of it is, again, another commercial consideration. It's a lot less expensive to produce a comic book than it is a television show or a movie, or something like that. So one of the things, we're dealing with commercial art, And even in education, they have to sort of deal with that in some way. So there's certain limitations about format and presentation that you just have to work with, you can't really work with.
I would say, as someone who writes articles and doesn't do pictures, that one of the wonderful things about comics is you see who's speaking. And I think that makes a difference, and it makes an impact. And so from someone who only works in text, I think having to decide how to depict someone is a real challenge, but it's also, I think, what makes this medium so powerful, in part.
Thank you very much. And we've reached the end of our budget time. So that was just sorry. One more.
My name is Matthew. I'm an absolute Shami, Chakra, Kinapu, System of Panayate, young man. And my question deals with sacred item reclamation, in that I've heard stories, but I'm not how true they are, but they do seem to make sense that some of our items are on the other side of the world across the sea. And if we could do something to reclaim those, that the United States and some of the South American countries would give back those relics, how would we come about doing something like that? Because I have a strong belief that the indigenous people of this side of the world have a key role in finding some sort of balance back in the world. And that has to do with like our stolen items. Like our prayers were altered, the way we were given our items were changed because like, they were passed down, and it's hard to go out there into the mountains and figure out how to do that again because of all the borders and walls being put up. Just thoughts, opinions, ideas about that, not necessarily a question, but I'm not sure how often that kind of idea is.
There's an ongoing struggle between European museums who have some key masterpieces, beautiful jewelry, and the famous green leather dress that's supposed to be honors of war, but actually never did it. It's a present that he gave to Cortez in Germany. And that's been going on for years, and it's a super difficult thing because you're dealing with I mean, it's literally on the other side of the world. And they're very entrenched because some of these museums, that's their key piece for their museum. They want to give it up. So I don't have an answer for it, but it is being addressed at least at least in terms of the stuff that I see with Aztec pieces. So they're trying. They're trying to get them.
I would say that what's happening more common internationally is the return of Native ancestors. I think museums are being more open to that, less so sacred objects. Just a few months ago, I saw a case where the State Department was facilitating the return of Native ancestors from a European nation to a Southwest tribe. But I think for sacred objects, I think it's less common, and there's a lot more work and more public pressure to be placed for that.
Again, we're going to wrap it up at this time, folks.
They've been doing burial remains too, bringing them back from places like Turkey and Hungary.
Thank you.
Thank you.